Hi, Shannon Waller here, and welcome to Inside Strategic Coach with Dan Sullivan. Dan, you made a comment the other day that I found fascinating and fun. And that was, we were talking about just the incredible number of tools you've done, and one in particular called the FAST filter, which is a shortened version of our impact filter. The number that I was looking at in a collaboration conversation we were having was 1,083. Mm-hmm. And you said that over 600 of those you've done in the last year, mm-hmm. which is kind of epic. And I sort of queried you about that. And he goes, yeah, it's Dan talking to Dan. And I was mm-hmm. like, I need to know more about this. So the part that I find really interesting, Dan, is why do you have conversations with yourself, or how do those happen? I think people do have conversations with yourself. You are the person that I know that is the most conscious and most aware of that. And you have a structure for it mm-hmm. that most people don't. So that's what I want to dive into today. Tell me about Dan talking to Dan.
Yeah, well, one of the things is I have a rule that I try not to get involved in things that I haven't created new confidence for. So the number one reason why I use the FAST filter is that there's an event. So for example, I did a FAST filter today. It was part of a FAST filter, our podcast that we're doing right now. And I say, now this is how you're going to be during the podcast with Shannon. Okay. I have another podcast with somebody else this afternoon. So I'm not just going to take the confidence that I had for last time, because it wears out. I mean, you've done something in the past, but the confidence that you had especially for that event, you don't have that confidence that carries over to the new event. So very, very specific, from 9:30 till noon, this is what I'm with. So what it says is this is the only thing important that you have to do between these hours. But I have to remind myself because, I may have been thinking about a lot of other things. Okay. But the other things that I developed is the person I'm talking to in the FAST filter is me, but I call him you. Yeah. Okay. Because this is my thinking about my thinking brain now saying, to get the best use and the best value from the 2.5 hours of podcasting, this is who you have to be. This is what you have to do. So it depersonalizes it a little bit. And the point is that there's a part of me that just goes off and does all sorts of things during the day, especially as it relates to the internet. I'm sort of a internet junkie. Mm-hmm. And I don't tell myself when I go on the internet, now you're looking for this, unless I am looking for this. Okay. But generally, I just let my brain go free, and it's interested in all sorts of things. I remember when the internet first came out that there were search engines, and then the search engines, like Google is a search engine, they said, but you can have a search engine that's just looking for things that are interesting to you. And I said, that would be boring. Mm-hmm. I'm not interested in what I already know. I'm interested in things I don't know. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, yeah, but it'll find what you're looking for. And I said, I'm looking for things that I didn't know I was looking for. There's only a few moments during the day when I just have to be totally focused. Mm-hmm. And the rest of the time, I let my mind wander. So it's about 3 things during the day. I try to keep it where it involves working with someone else. Yeah. Or I've got a deadline and I've committed that I'm going to get something done and to do it. So, for example, we did a interview yesterday, the start of a new book. Mm-hmm. Okay. And we had another guest who was part of the interview. So before I actually wrote the FAST filter that we were going to talk about, the actual content, I wrote a FAST filter of just now, this is the start of a new book. This is really important. You have a guest writer, mm-hmm. another writer whose name is going to appear on the front cover. And we've not done this before. So this is how I'm going to be. And this is how the discussion is going to go. And this is what we're going to cover and everything. But that's the backstage direction to me before I go front stage with the teamwork.
Yeah, it sounds like you're coaching yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
That is so cool.
Yeah. I mean, I was coaching myself for 30 years before I learned how to sell it.
And then you figured out the business model.
Yeah, I don't think I'm rare in this, but I think being yourself is a full-time job.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm the only one I have a direct access to. I don't have direct access to any human being. I think I created thinking tools because it actually gives me better access to other people than just, you know, disorganized conversation and communication.
The word that was coming to mind as you were talking is intentionality. Even before you set up the content for yesterday's recording, you actually were intentional about how you were going to be, right? Which means you're incredibly focused. And if you're normal, your brain is wandering all over the place. Mm-hmm. Me too. This is a way to harness it in a really enjoyable way. It's not a hard way, but you're talking to yourself, you, which is amazing. And that allows you to be very present, which I think is talked about access to other people. Very difficult to connect with other people if you're not present, right? And in the 2.5 hours that we spend together, we're incredibly productive because we're not distracted by a cajillion things. It's interesting because the reason why you created the impact filter, you know, the whole context around it was actually intentionality. Let's talk for a minute about that. Why is intentionality so critical for entrepreneurs, especially?
Well, I think, you know, you're thinking, you're communicating, you're taking action, you're getting results that are specifically useful for you. Okay. And that's why I don't like going to conferences where there's just a whole bunch of speakers. And the reason is they're there for their purposes, but they're using up my time. Okay. Most of the time, you know, if I'm 5 minutes into someone talking from stage and they're going to be there for 30, 40 minutes and it just doesn't serve my I just walk out, I go to the lobby and, you know, I might sit down and do some thinking on my computer or, you know, get involved with someone who I find really interesting and we talk, but it's just the two of us for, you know, 15, 20 minutes until I hear the applause and then I go back in. But the interesting thing is they're very biased in what they're talking about. And I'm not interested in their biases.
No.
You know, and I found television all that way about 6 years ago. So I haven't watched a minute of television for 6 minutes because it was just nothing that they were presenting and talking about and putting an enormous amount of it. None of it interested me. It didn't serve any of my purposes. You know, it's very interesting with artificial intelligence coming on. I've got a favorite app. People say, you know, there's all these different apps that you can explore. And I said, yeah, but I don't have any need for them. Okay. But this one, it's called Perplexity. It's just the best search engine I've ever found because I ask it great questions. You know, I ask it really interesting historical questions. You know, I'm very interested in history. You know, for example, I was really interested, where did the Islamic world in the year 1000 was just a wonderfully creative cultural civilization that was, you know, in the Middle East and North Africa and partially in Europe. And they were creating great art. They were creating great poetry. They were doing science. They were doing mathematics. And it was considered the golden age of Islamic culture. You know, it was about 400 years old from the 7th century, 600s. And it just produced an enormous amount of richness in the culture. And then it stopped. It just stopped. And it was like 1258. There's actually a date when it stopped. And it was the Mongol invasion from Central Europe, Genghis Khan. And they just came in and they just destroyed the culture of all these cities, Baghdad, Damascus, and everything. And these were the heart of learning on the planet. And it just stopped like that. And the way they stopped it is they just killed everybody. That'll stop a culture if you just get killed. So I was sitting there and I was just asking it questions about 1258. You know, I said, this is fascinating. I never knew that.
No.
And then it just went into retreat. Economically, they went into retreat. Politically, they went into retreat. And it was because, you know, it was probably the greatest invading force in the history of the world was Genghis Khan because they were superb horsemen.
Perplexity.ai is such an incredible, you know, research partner. So our friend and client, Evan Ryan's the one that turned us on to it. And his company is teammate AI.
Yeah.
And it's just been so fun to use.
Great teammate.
It's a phenomenal teammate, which is really fun. So going back to thinking about your thinking, Dan, you get to explore your thoughts, have a great research partner and buddy in that particular search engine. But it means really that you can pursue your own thinking, and from our last podcast, and be sort of immune and unmanipulated by other people's thinking. Mm-hmm. So it allows you to be fully intentional, fully focused, which I find, first of all, unusual. A lot of entrepreneurs are technically ADHD, and if not, they act like it or feel like it anyway.
And we live in sort of an ADHD world. Everybody's trying to grab your attention, mm-hmm. And if you don't have a sense of who you are and what you're up to and what you want, you're very, very distracted. Mm-hmm. And being distracted and not getting anything done, it just feels terrible.
It does. And for entrepreneurs, there's such a high cost to that.
Yeah.
Right? Distracted entrepreneurs, not productive, not profitable, not moving things ahead, everything's squirrel. And it's interesting because you and I have a similar Colby profile with lots of quick start, mental energy, but both of us, I think, are able to and very conscious of being able to focus fast and quickly on things that were really important. And I love that you have that conversation with yourself. I just think that's,
Yeah, you do this and you do that, but I'm aware that it's not a division, but there's sort of a teamwork. There's my thinking brain and there's my acting brain. Okay. And these are independent from each other unless you create structures that allow the teamwork to actually happen. My feeling is that one of the impacts of a strategic coach with all of our thinking tools, that the energy that people get and the sense of confidence they get is that we allow them to be in teamwork between their thinking brain and their acting brain.
I love every second of this.
Yeah. Yeah. They don't feel this tension. They don't feel that there's a conflict going on between them. I often say, what is happening in the room? They all just got energized. What's happened? They're in teamwork with each other, and then it allows them to be in teamwork with other people who are doing the same thing. I think it releases really neat drugs inside your body, dopamine and serotonin, all the good drugs,
Absolutely.
Gets rid of the cortisol and the adrenaline.
Well, being in teamwork with yourself. And I think a lot of people, especially if they're not.
That's a good tool.
There you go, Dan. Being in teamwork with yourself.
Being in teamwork with yourself.
There you go. I think that's what we'll call this podcast.
It's hard being in teamwork with others if you're not in teamwork with yourself.
Well, and again, I don't think a lot of people realize the inner conflict, the conversations, the kind of like the battle that's going on, especially in an entrepreneur's mind. I was seeing a post from a friend of mine that says, the dilemma of the entrepreneur, and it was 3:03 in the morning, waking up, thinking about things, going, how should I think about this? What should I do? And the fact that you actually delineate thinking brain versus acting brain. And the other thought that comes to mind is in the quarterly workshops. I mean, we have people stop and think about their thinking minimum once a quarter. But it's so powerful how that one day a quarter where they get to, basically put context around their content, as we talked about in our last podcast, and really understand and contextualize their experience, leverages them for the next 90 days. I mean, there's lots of points of connection in between if they want, but at a very minimum. And one of the things I used to tell my clients, like, if I can help you just think 20% more, you will double your income. Like, it's amazing how a little bit more thinking time propels those actions to big, big results.
Focus thinking time.
Focus thinking time. Yes.
But I think what we're doing is that we're creating teamwork with themselves. And I hadn't said that before, it's just coming out of our conversation.
Yeah. Being in teamwork with yourself is just so powerful.
Generally, I'm more so at 80 than I was at 70, far, far more at 70 than I was at 50. I just don't have much inner conflict where I am right now.
Right. And there's a benefit, obviously, to yourself, but also to other people. I know when I'm around someone who's calm, who's at peace with their own thinking and acting, it is an expansive experience for the people around you. And I know people experience that around you, Dan. I like it when I'm calm and I'm not in conflict. I work hard at that. And you can really tell when someone is not grounded, not centered, squirrely. I can name names. And you're like, oh, just think about your thinking some more. Be in teamwork with yourself because it's so evident when they're not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Dan, I just want to leave people with a clear action step because the number one tool for this is the impact filter. And that's something that people do have access to, even if you're not in coach yet, is the impact filter. And then basically the fast filter is a shorter version of that, which instead of, purpose, importance, ideal outcome, it's purpose. But the best result, and instead of 8 success criteria, there are 5. So it's very similar. But let's just close off with, you use that tool. How long does it take you to do your version of the fast filter?
We spent an hour on that one fast filter yesterday, hour and a half, really.
Hour and a half.
We have to get a little quicker.
It was the first one with the 3 of us, so it was good. Yeah. And Dan, you also, I think, do a fast filter on your day.
Yeah, every day.
Yeah. And then if you're experiencing a lag of energy, you'll do one, right?
Yeah. And actually, it was very interesting. I'm ADD, clinically diagnosed. I've got a bright, shiny thing, attention. I like things. So as a result, 12 years ago, I was diagnosed and they gave me a drug that helps me focus and gets my energy up called Adderall. I'm not the only person in the world using it, I can tell you that. But it was very, very helpful. Slowed things down. I had better focus. But over time, it interferes with your ability to sleep because your natural sleep pattern during the day, you should get tired. So I decided to go off of it, and I used the fast filter to get off the drug.
That's amazing. How did you do that? Because I know you would end up doing quite a few fast filters in the day.
Because I took more than one Adderall a day, Well, one is I established a rule, don't do anything creative after 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So if you got to get something done for tomorrow, do it before 3. And actually, around 7 o'clock in the morning till noon is my best creative time. So, I arranged things so that I wasn't forcing myself to be doing late at night work or late in the afternoon work.
Yeah.
But what I did was I said, every time you get the feeling where you'd want to take an Adderall or part of an Adderall, do a fast filter. And it would give me instant focus for about 2 hours.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that's amazing, Dan.
Yeah. Energy was back up, focus was there, and I could get a lot done in 2 hours.
Yeah.
But I don't want to overuse it. But I restrict myself to 3 important projects a day.
Which is how you did 600 in the last year.
Yeah.
And last question about this. And by the way, everyone has access to the impact filter. So we'll put the links in the show notes, but get to know the full impact filter because you do want to understand the purpose, importance, and ideal outcome. So Dan, the other thing about this is because I also asked you, how many of them do you actually pass off to other people? Because it's a brilliant teamwork tool. As we were talking about from our last podcast, it sets the context for what it is, the why, for what it is, the action is you're looking for. And you said very few.
So much of my schedule is structured in the year because I have workshops, which are all in the schedule. I have book recordings, which are all in the schedule. I have podcasts, which are 90% in the schedule and everything. So my meetings are actually project execution. That's where I'm working with other people. But if I get a new idea about something that nobody has really thought about before, I send them a fast filter and I said, I'd like to have a meeting on this. I find because I have to create a fast filter, I've become more discriminating. I've become more discerning about, does this really deserve a meeting? I mean, is it important enough to have a meeting? Because if they get a fast filter from me, it's 100% on my side.
Yeah.
I'm 100% committed. So
it's a go.
I want you to think about this, and you have feedback, but I want you to know what the meeting's about before we have the meeting.
Yeah.
Because you can do thinking before we come into the meeting.
And there is a phenomenal byproduct of that, Dan.
But also they can't have a meeting with me unless I get a filter.
And how long are meetings with you, Dan?
Very short.
Which is phenomenal. I mean,
but I've already thought through what the meeting's about before we have the meeting. I have a absolute passion for not wasting other people's time.
And to have your time not be wasted too.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Which is so powerful. And I think a lot of people come into conversations with no intentionality and with
Oh,
no
yeah.
focus, and they're not in teamwork with themselves.
I would say 99% of the meetings that probably take place in the world, the meeting is to figure out what they're meeting for.
It takes forever. It's a waste of time, which is why people hate it.
And then they schedule another meeting.
Yeah, which is why people hate meetings
Yeah.
in general. And I know, and you and I have done this numerous times. If I want to have a meeting with you, I fill out a fast filter or even a full impact filter if it's a bigger project. Like I'll send it to you, and sometimes it'll be like, yes. And then we don't even have to have a meeting.
Yeah, like this. Let's go with it.
Let's do it. Or once you counter offered too, it's like, well, this is.
Yeah. They can come back and say, well, what's the priority of this new thing? Because we already have a lot of priorities. And I said, yeah, okay, that's cool. We don't have to have it next week. We can have it in 1 month, or we can approach it in a different way. But all this thinking has happened in a very focused way before the meeting. So we've saved ourselves a lot of meeting time.
And you've kind of taken, again, going back to being in teamwork with yourself, you've clarified your own thoughts. The thing I love, love, love about our thinking tools, and I've said this before, is that I am smarter at the end of completing it than I was when I started. I like anything that has me be more intelligent to myself.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm clear about my idea. I'm clear on the purpose. And if I'm not, I stop and I don't have the meaning. Right. It's like, oh, this is actually not such a good idea. So if I can't sell myself, there's no way I'm going to attempt to sell someone else. But, you have this great line, I don't brainstorm in public. If an idea comes with an impact filter, it's legit. And if it doesn't, you're just talking.
Yeah.
And that's an incredible piece of clarity and coaching that you give to your team, that we encourage our clients and our team members to have the same standard.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. If I measure back 10 years right now, just turned 80. And if I go back 7 years ago, for every 3 meetings I had 10 years ago, I only have 1 meeting now.
So 2/3 fewer meetings.
They've disappeared. I say, is this really worth having a meeting? Is this really worth bothering people with this idea? But I think the idea has become more important.
Mm-hmm. As you become even more discerning than you were 10 years ago, you have an incredibly good sense of what makes sense to proceed with and what doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have a question, I say, is there any way we can solve this by doing nothing? And then I said, what's the least we can get away to solve this problem? And then is there somebody else who can do the least? So I don't have to do it. I find I get more and more refined. But the other thing is my goals are bigger for the future. It's very, very interesting. I have a fast filter that I review every day, and it's 5 really big goals. Okay, so the first goal is 156-year lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And then I say, related to my 156-year lifetime, what can I do today that improves my chances?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Number 2 is create 1,000 thinking tools by age 100. I'm a quarter that way there, but there's going to be a lot more thinking tools over the next 20 years. And number 3 is $1 billion in patent value from all of our thinking tools by 2044.
Okay.
Another one is that the total value of all the strategic coach clients when I'm 100 is $15 trillion in asset value. What can I do today to do it? So what you're doing is I've got these 5 big contextual goals that really take in the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And then what's the actual action that I can take just before I go to bed tonight? What are 5 actions I can take that nudge it along, nudge it in the right direction? There's a 5th one. Here, let me check.
Is it make Babs happy?
Well, that's a given. Yeah. 100 quarterly books by 2039. And when we're working on number 39, those are the thing. And then I just say, today, I'm on all my actions. I'm going to take 5 things that support these 5 goals. It just locks me in with where I'm going. And it's cool.
It is cool.
And I don't think anyone else in the world is working on those 5 goals.
Nope. I can say with that.
They're working on 5 of their own.
Yeah.
which they probably don't know.
That's my point. I've known of these separately. I didn't know you had a fast filter on them.
Yeah, and I review them every day,
Yeah.
But it doesn't put me in the gap because I just have what I can do today, but I'm reinforcing them in my brain every day.
I'm so going to do this for myself, like today. I love that. So, Dan, one of the things that's interesting, it kind of explains why you're so easy to be in teamwork with, according to me. And that is because you're in teamwork with yourself. You're aligned, you're intentional, you're focused, and you're present. It's a breeze to work with you. And I work with you a lot. Like we have 3 things in 3 days. We're spending a lot of time together this week, which I love. But it makes it really easy. So I think one of the things that from a teamwork angle, if you want to be in great teamwork with people, be in teamwork with yourself first. And then using a communication tool like a thinking process, like the impact filter, lets people in on what's most important to you, lets people know what the purpose, importance, ideal outcome is, what the best case scenario is if it works out, how you feel about it. The worst case, if you don't take action or if it goes poorly, and then the 8 success criteria or 5 in the fast filter, it's like, it's really, really clear. And then people can go, yes, it's like this massive invitation to teamwork outside of yourself. So the whole process is just elegant and simple.
Yeah.
I like it a lot.
Yeah. And, I've been coaching entrepreneurs. This will be 50 years this year, but I've been coaching myself that I can specifically pinpoint when I started this process, and it was at age 20, So I had about 10 years, 20 to 30, because I started coaching entrepreneurs when I was 30. So I had about 10 years of just getting my act together before I started creating a process where they could get their act together.
Yeah.
This is what I do. People said, where do you see yourself 10 years from now? I said, doing basically what I did yesterday, but a lot better.
Well, that must be so confidence building, Dan.
Well, and it's relaxing.
That's a good
I'm
word.
not worried about a changing world. I've always been able to spot somebody who's trapped in the past. I'm noticing more and more people trapped in the future. They are so fixated on a totally unpredictable future that they can't get anything done today.
Yeah, that's a great insight.
That's what being trapped in the past. You can't take advantage of today. So that's a podcast.
That's a podcast and an exercise, I think. This is how it happens, everybody, just so you know. So Dan, thank you for kind of letting us in on the backstage process of Dan. I know that I do it, not as much as you do, but when I do it, it works. It's just one of those things. So bringing that to a higher level of awareness and being consistent about it is key. I'm leaving with a ton of really fun action ideas to be in better teamwork with myself. So thank you.
Just another pitch for the fast filter. It saves on drugs.
Yeah, it does. Get your brain focused on point. That's definitely the way to go. Dan, thank you so much.
Thank you, Shannon.